Welcome back to the Mainstream with myself and John. John, what is it that you reckon we should kick off with?
I reckon we should do Media Watch on the Media Watch segment on the ABC.
The ABC's Media Watch. Well,
Where would the ABC be without the content the IPA provides it?
I don't know. I don't know, John, but I can tell you that they have been using IPA's work very recently on immigration of all issues, and there was a segment on Media Watch recently that critiqued the IPA's work. Now, what was interesting is this came on the back of what was, I've been at the IPA for 10 years. I've never seen this happen before. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, which people trust as an independent agency about all of the data, so all of the GDP, inflation, unemployment data, they have decided to intervene into the debate about immigration and have been trying to shut down journalists that are reporting on this. And I just want to tell you what's been happening, because this is really interesting and gives you an insight into how the government is trying to censor debate. So we put out some information. So this is from the 14th of August. The ABS, as usual, put out its routine information on immigration and the massive size of the numbers. Our media release said record levels of unplanned migration continue as Australians struggle, and that was based on a media release which showed that net permanent and long-term arrivals in financial year ending 2025 was at 457,560, which was the second highest on record. And then for the year to date, so from January to June this year, it was 279,000, which was the highest on record. That's straight from the Australian Bureau of Statistics.
And that then got lots of media coverage.
They got a lot of media coverage because the government has been saying we're bringing it down, but the data shows it's going up.
Oh, so the government's saying something different from what's actually happening.
But then another government agency is saying the other thing. Okay, so who do you trust? So then the Australian Bureau of Statistics got in contact with a number of journalists who have reported on this issue, including Ben Fordham at 2GB.
And what did they say? That was it's about 1,500.
1,500 a day.
1,500.
About 1,500 net immigrants per day coming into Australia. So here's an email that I acquired. I'm not going to reveal my sources of an email that was sent by the ABS to one of the parties involved that they're trying to shut down.
The ABS didn't contact you?
The ABS did not contact the IPA. And do you think the ABC contacted the IPA?
I'm sure the ABC would have given the IPA a right of reply. They would have given you lots of time to determine a response and engage with the dozen or so producers working at the ABC's Media Watch program.
Well, maybe they did. Maybe it's still in the mail. Maybe I was washing my hair when they gave me the phone call, but I haven't received any information or right of reply.
So the ABC and the ABS do everything they can to get around the IPA.
Exactly.
When they're talking about your research.
On immigration.
On immigration.
Now, I'm not going to read the whole email out. It's very long, but I'll read this part to you. So this is the email from the ABS to one of the journalists' parties that are trying to shut down. We read with interest your recent article about migration into Australia. It has a quote there. Then it says, our data experts have raised concerns about the information you've used, which we've highlighted below. Is it possible to update the online story with these changes? Now, I won't read out all of this because it goes on and on, but basically it says it's inaccurate and misleading to use our overseas and arrivals data as a measure of migration.
Is it?
So there's two main measures of migration. There's overseas arrivals and departures, and then there's the net overseas migration numbers that people are most familiar with. Now, we can get into the details of how these differ. Our media release, by the way, explicitly explains the two measures and how they differ. But what's really interesting, John, is this. There's a government agency called the Centre for Population, and it has literally written the handbook on how to measure migration. And its handbook is called The Fundamentals of Migration in Australia, Migration Concepts and Measurement. And it says that the net permanent and long-term arrivals measure is, quote, an early indicator of future migration flows, end quote.
Now, that's what
we said.
That's what you said. So let's get this right. So you've got one government agency wanting to shut down debate, wanting to correct misleading reports of our research. You've got another government agency saying that, in fact, what the IPA did is correct and that the two numbers are related.
Yep. And in a nutshell...
So who do we believe, the government or the government?
Well, I'll tell you who I believe, the IPA's research. And in a nutshell, the net overseas migration number is more reliable, but there's a massive lag in how it comes out. So we have this net permanent and long-term arrivals data, which comes out every month. Everybody uses it as a leading indicator.
The government itself says it's a leading indicator.
But now, because the numbers are inconsistent with the government's policy and what they're telling us, all of a sudden the ABS, the ABC comes out to try and shut down debate. Now, do you think? Well, I'm going to ask you. Do you think some ABS expert was just scanning and scrolling on their phone when they came across journalists reporting IPA research? It's possible. It's possible. I worked in the public service for 4 years. I worked in the federal public service for 4 years.
From home was that?
Well, at that time, 0. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have worked from home in the public service. But although a lot of people turned up in what appeared to be pajamas anyway when they worked there, but I can tell you that we have submitted a Freedom of Information request because I suspect either the Assistant Treasurer or the Treasurer, because the ABS sits in the Treasury portfolio, it'll be one of those two have directed the ABS to do this. I suspect, and we've sent in a Freedom of Information request to find out more information.
And you mentioned to me earlier that this has been picked up by the 9 newspapers too.
It has been picked up by the 9 newspapers, and there was an opinion piece published which gets into this issue, and it's criticising the work of the IPA, basically saying that we have been misleading in what we have
written
done.
by an academic, I assume. Funny that. Where would Australian universities be without the IPA?
Written by an academic at the Australian National University who claims that the data is wrong, along the lines of the ABS claim, but also claiming that we've mistaken it with tourist data and short-term arrivals, which is absolutely
so. After you pointed out
not
to the SMH and the Age that in fact we were following the government's own advice, what was their response?
We're going to publish it anyway. And you mentioned last week trust in the media with the Edelman.
I did, yeah.
Why do they think trust in the media is declining?
Yeah.
Why does no one buy newspapers anymore?
Because of this.
Because of this. Now, I just want to make one point on immigration. There's so many numbers out there. This number to me demonstrates what's happening. So we looked at population growth since the year 2000. So it has increased by 43% in Australia. So it's increased almost by half in Australia since the year 2000. This is the highest of any comparable nation. So New Zealand 38%, Canada 35%, US 21%, UK 18%. Okay, so no matter which way you look at these numbers, Australia's population growth is faster than any comparable nation. So,
what's been the public response to this?
Well, we saw them
on the weekend.
We saw them on the streets. I don't know about you. I've never seen. We had COVID demonstrations during COVID in Victoria. Outside of that, and maybe you've got a longer term memory than me, but I've never seen sort of this was relatively spontaneous grassroots demonstrations. There was no, I think Pauline Hanson was there. Otherwise, I don't know of any notable political leaders that were there. I haven't seen this happen before in Australia. Have you seen anything like this?
Not that I can recall. And what's interesting has been the media response to this. So the media have spent their time talking about those elements that had no place in the protest and have ignored most of the debate around why anyone would be there wanting to talk about what is happening to this country, the scale and rate of change. And interestingly, the protests did provoke another academic, this time Liam Gillespie, an academic in criminology at the University of Melbourne, to write in The Guardian a few days after the protests, not just talk about the protests, but to have a go at the concept of Australia as a whole. And
what did he say?
Well, let me begin by, I don't know whether The Guardian did this deliberately or not, but there was a shot of the protests, and you should be able to see that. How good is that? Australian.
I can see Aboriginal flags. Oh no, just the Australian flag.
Yeah, funny that.
Wow.
Funny that. So yeah, well, how good is that to see? But of course, this was an opportunity for Liam Gillespie to talk about the fact that the term protest might be used to invoke a sense of legitimate grievance, or it could be a dog whistle for racism. But do you know what's worse? And we talk about the Australian way of life here at the IPA, our culture, our heritage. Liam goes on, did you know, Dan, that Australian heritage or Australian culture could be a stand-in for ideas of racial purity? So when we talk about Australian culture, our heritage, we don't talk about our freedoms, we don't talk about our open spaces, we don't talk about how we live together, we don't talk about the opportunities that Australia has provided to millions of people who have arrived in this country. No, no, no. It's about racial purity. But he goes on, and this is my favourite bit. And only an academic could write this, even the word Australia, Dan, itself can be deployed as a euphemism. Oh my goodness, imagine deploying the word Australia as a euphemism, supposedly invoking something everyone would want to protect and preserve. Bloody oath we want to protect and preserve it, and in the name in which to mobilise. So can you guess what then follows if you have got an academic talking about Australia as a euphemism? You talk about Australian heritage, you talk about Australian culture, you talk about the word Australia, and then you are invoking the language of the National Socialist Network. This is what we are up against. This is why people were in the streets.
You mentioned a dog whistle. You know the thing about dog whistles, don't you? Only dogs can hear them. Well, this is all happening at the same time as it is Flag Day.
Fantastic.
National Flag Day. You weren't expecting that one.
No, I wasn't.
National Flag Day.
Thank you, The Guardian, for supporting National Flag Day.
National Flag Day. And
How good is the flag?
I love the flag, and I want to give a shout out to my colleague Morgan Begg. We've just published today a monograph, which is an extended essay about the Australian flag, which comes on the back of a monograph he also did on Australia Day. So he's going to have to figure out what the third one will be next year.
What's the euphemism that Morgan is using in this context?
Well, it's very. I want to just highlight a couple of things that I learnt about the flag that I really love. The first thing is.
You mean you didn't learn this in school?
I probably didn't. Probably didn't learn it in school. The first thing is what the flag actually represents. So when you have all the different components of the flag and what it represents. So the Union Jack represents the institutions that we all share. The Federation Star represents each of the states, the coming together of disparate people under a united vision of Australia's future. And the Southern Cross represents our unique place in the world, that Australia is not just an idea, but an actual place where we coexist together. And what's also interesting, John, is you'll know that efforts to change the flag have always been a predilection of the political class. It's not the person on the street that wants to change it. And what I learned from this monograph and studying the flag recently is the flag was a product of the community. It was the product of a competition that was initiated in 1900 for Australians to submit their ideas of what our flag should be. And there was over 30,000 submissions, which is about 1% of the entire population.
I knew it was a competition, but I didn't realise there were 30,000.
So people were very engaged. And what's interesting is many of the entries included something to do with the Southern Cross and something to do with the Union Jack. So these symbols mean something to Australia. This flag was not invented by politicians. It was not invented by elites. It was invented and developed by the Australian
people. So it's
people.
A bit populist, maybe.
Maybe it's a bit populist.
Maybe that's why Paul Keating wanted to change.
He wanted to change. Well, the main idea of how to change it has been to get rid of the Union Jack and put the Aboriginal component in place of the.
Yeah, we'll come to this, but given what's happening at the UK at the moment, maybe we could take the Union Jack off and replace it.
But you'd support that as a Republican, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. Maybe we could put the American flag on.
Put the American. You reckon?
Let's change the debate.
Yeah. Would you vote for Republic now? If it was held today, or would it depend on?
I'm a Republican in theory, but I'm a monarchist in practice because I think we have a pretty successful system of government, although every day that goes by, I think it's a little bit less successful. But if there was to be an option for a directly elected president, I might have to think very carefully about voting yes.
Well, I wouldn't because I don't hate Australia, but...
Hang on, you wouldn't vote yes or you wouldn't vote no?
I wouldn't vote for a Republic, but that is...
But what about if, Tex Walker or Shane Warne gets to be president?
I would then support it.
Okay,
If big text was... But that's the strongest argument. The strongest argument is our system of government, for a variety of...
is now broken.
Is broken and incapable
Of fixing itself.
of fixing it and of transmitting the values of mainstream Australians into political outcomes. The reason is that Labor, as we talked about before, is a sock puppet for sectional interests, incapable of representing the national interest. They just cannot do it. And the Liberal Party and the Coalition are a rabble.
Will by and large follow what Labor does.
As they
Which is,
did.
and this is interesting, which is why, so the argument was that after the defeat of the Elites Voice program, there was no prospect of a referendum being put up on the Republic. But Labor will not put up a referendum on the Republic because the only option that the public could contemplate would be a directly elected president. And the political parties, Labor, National and the Liberals, will not want to lose control of the political process, which is why they will never allow a directly elected president to go to the people.
Yeah. That would be, I would only...
Which is the best reason for voting yes. If the political parties don't want it, vote the opposite.
You might be able to turn me on it. I mean, I think if we keep going this way for another 5 or 10 years, it is likely the case that only systemic change to our system of government is going to be the forcing function we need to get the change.
Well, and now we've got, over the last couple of days, there's talk about Labor bringing up 4-year terms, increasing the size of the parliament, which I think does have a lot of merit. But as we've talked about, you've got the major political parties just enshrining their power through legislative privileges, through restrictions on fundraising, through every means possible to not allow new incumbents to enter the political scene.
Yeah. But we've talked about the UK, and you mentioned it a moment ago. It's a little bit different there, where we've seen Nigel Farage make a lot of ground. So if an election were held today, he would be Prime Minister of the UK now.
Most likely, yes.
There's 4 years.
Yeah, it is.
4 odd years
You
to
don't
go.
read articles about what Nigel Farage will do as Prime Minister, and you think, well, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip.
There is. But I wanted to get so you made a good point when we were talking before about Nigel Farage talking about freedom of speech.
Well, when we talked, sorry.
Yep, and in the US.
Well, no. Well, it's interesting that at the very time that Nigel Farage is in the US giving testimony to a Congressional Committee on Freedom of Speech and its decline and death in Europe and the UK, overnight the British comedian Graham Lenihan was arrested when he arrived back in the UK at Heathrow. He was arrested by 5 armed policemen, or police people, in UK parlance because of a couple of trans tweets. He was held for something like 12 hours, I think maybe even more, until he was given medical treatment. And at the same time as Keir Starmer and the entire British establishment is saying we have freedom of speech, you have this happening to Graham Lenihan. And as he wrote on his Substack, literally pedophiles in the UK are not treated this way. He said he was treated as a terrorist. You have the Lucy Connolly scandal in the UK, and you have a political class not responding. You have now in the UK people painting road roundabouts in George's Cross as a symbol of their commitment to England, and then you've got Labor politicians saying this is racist. There's one Labor politician we reported a couple of days ago who had great problems with the Union Jack and the George Cross, but had no problems standing behind the flag of Palestine.
The mood is going to get very fertile.
Well, we've spoken about this. You can talk about how the political system in the UK will respond. I think we might have mentioned this very popular podcast episode talking about the dimensions of a civil war, and to even use that sort of language to contemplate that sort of discussion seems remarkable. But, this is entering the discourse in the UK, and Nigel Farage and Reform seem to be the only party responding to any of the concerns that the mass of the public have.
And what we also discussed was the move to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote.
Well, you picked it. You called it.
We picked it that it would be.
No, you called it.
Okay, that's fair.
Tell us what you said. No,
It was mostly the effect of, in all likelihood, it will be Farage, and I think I said Greens, Lib Dems, and so forth on the left that would benefit. So young women or girls,
you called it.
Left, and boys would vote Farage. So that's largely been the case, with some polling saying actually 24% would back Labor of the 16 to 24-year-olds. Guess how many 16 to 17-year-olds. Guess how many 16 to 17-year-olds girls would back Conservatives?
10%?
5%.
Or was it 5%?
5%. Reform was 25% boys, actually 19% girls, and it's saying here about 20% would back a yet unnamed potential Jeremy Corbyn left-wing party. So I hadn't anticipated the Jeremy Corbyn thing, but it's quite split between Labor, Corbyn, and Reform.
Yeah.
So,
and this is, again, as we've talked about, and this is why we're not going to be seeing votes for 16 and 17-year-olds in Australia anytime soon.
I don't think it'll, I can't say it'll never happen, but it won't happen because Labor will not benefit. And as you said, they don't need to do it anyway. This was also interesting in the article. 58% of boys rated their life satisfaction as 7 out of 10 or higher, but it was only 37% of girls that rated their life satisfaction. That's remarkable, that gap.
Well, and this is another manifestation of that huge gender gap emerging in political attitudes, in ideology, in belief systems between males and females.
At 16, almost a quarter of boys and girls, 16 to 17 years old, said they suffer from anxiety, and it was 34% among girls. I mean, I wonder how much of this is actually driving the voting patterns.
Well, exactly. And again, the IPA does have its climate change anxiety project examining exactly what teachers are doing to young people, talking to them about the planet ending. And the reason the planet ending is because it's the fault of young people. And that's why the net zero debate, such as it is in Australia, is important at so many levels. So are you going to give us a net zero update?
I'll give you a net zero update. Good update.
Okay.
Good update.
Something to be positive about.
We've had a lot of action.
Okay, are we winning?
We are winning. We've had the Barnaby-Joyce Private Members Bill, which continues to be debated in Parliament. And now we've had the great Senator Matt Canavan put in a Private Members Bill, or going to soon put in a Private Members Bill into the Senate, which I understand is going to be the same as Barnaby-Joyce's bill. So what that means, in effect, is we're going to have a debate in the Senate as well as the lower house. There may be a vote on it. There may not be. It may go to a committee. It may not.
So if you were Susan Lee, what would you do?
Well, here's the number one thing. So if Susan Lee wants to keep her job, she should dump net zero.
Go on.
If she dumps net zero, she'll be leader at the next election. And Susan Lee wants to be Prime Minister. The only way you can be Prime Minister is by being opposition leader at the time of the next election. So the way to do that is dumping net zero, because at the moment, the conservative forces have made net zero the yardstick. And if she says, all right, fine, we're getting rid of it, there's no impetus to change leader at the moment. So I reckon if you want to, the job of a political leader fundamentally is to keep their job. So if you want to do that, dump net zero and you'll keep your job.
And we covered Media Watch already, but I have something to add to the Media Watch segment under the net zero heading, Dan. Well, we talked about the report from the US Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. Major report featuring contributions by people like Steve Koonin and others. And I commented on the complete lack of coverage in the Australian media of this report. And lo and behold, the great Chris Mitchell, former editor of The Australian, who has a weekly column in The Australian, wrote a very good piece this week talking about the failures of the mainstream media on a number of factors, including climate change. But I have to correct Chris Mitchell, as hesitant as I am, because he wrote this week, this column can find no coverage of the report here apart from The Guardian's criticism of it and a piece by Andrew Bolt. No, you heard it first on the mainstream. Andrew's coverage of the report followed the mainstream. So
I think it was only, you mentioned Credlin.
And Credlin had mentioned it. So if we're looking for corrections from The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and the ABC's Media Watch, Chris, we need you to issue a little correction too, please. We'll have to have Chris on to talk about it.
We'll get Chris on to talk
about
it.
But it raises it raises the broader point, as Mitchell wrote about. This is a very significant report from the US. The entire debate is changing overseas. Kemi Badenoch, the UK Tory leader, for the moment is talking about the need to drill North Sea oil and gas. Trump is doing the same. The rest of the world is doing the same. And yet resolutely the Australian media, the mainstream media, refuse to cover any of that and tell Australians what is happening around the rest of the world.
Well, I want to go to something completely different. Are you a Swiftie?
No.
You're not a Swiftie?
No, I don't like her music and I don't share her politics.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And I'm not a Kansas City Chiefs fan. NFL starts this week. Very excited.
Who do you follow it, do you?
I do. And
Who do you go for?
well, it's a combination of the 49ers and a little bit of Dallas as America's team. And somehow I found myself following American college football as well.
Yeah.
Just because
Pass
it's
the
a
time.
interesting leads, pass the time, but also, I watched a bit of the college games this week. How do they start a college game? They start by covering the field with an enormous American flag. They start by honouring the military. They sing the national anthem with pride and gusto. And you've got 50, 60, 70,000 Americans proud to be there, proud to be American, and happy just to see a game of football without being preached at. So I want to get excited about the upcoming AFL finals, and I'll even follow a bit of the NRL, but there are limits.
Or the Ashes as well. I just can't get around the cricket team.
I thought Pat Cummins was a bit of a hero of yours. Go on. So tell us about
Swift, Taylor Swift.
So I did have to tell you about Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I forgot what we were talking about. So Taylor Swift. So the reason I bring up Taylor Swift, so this is sort of a follow-on from our Media Watch section.
Why are you bringing up Taylor Swift?
I don't...
Other than to get clicks.
I'm not a big fan of her music, but I don't mind her. I don't think that she's the dumbest celebrity, and I don't think she's going to...
But she did say vote Kamala.
She won't do that again. She lost the fight with Trump. And just as Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too, Republicans also listen to Taylor Swift's music. She started as a country
Michael Jordan was actually at the Carolina game 2 days ago. They had him up on the big screen in Carolina, coached by Bill Belichick, got annihilated.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
here's an example of how the media misleads. Okay, so I bring up Taylor Swift. So the headline, this is from a British online newspaper called The Independent.
Yep. No, well.
And it says, Taylor Swift's New Heights podcast audience dwarfs Joe Rogan's Trump interview. Okay, so the point of this is to say that the culture, the vibe shift is with Taylor Swift.
And young females, young left-leaning females.
Not with Trump, not with Rogan, not with the brosphere or the manosphere.
Not with men.
So that's why they're doing this. Now, I couldn't care either way. I don't have an issue with Taylor Swift, but I'm just bringing this up.
You saw the headline.
So that's the headline, and I thought, I don't think that's true. I do not think that's true. Now, it turns out it isn't true. And how do we know that? From the article itself. So the article itself is actually the opposite of the headline. So remember, they're saying Taylor Swift has a bigger audience than Trump. So what it says here is the pop star appeared on Wednesday on her podcast with her boyfriend, Travis, I don't know how to say his last name, Kelce, had more than 1.3 million viewers tuned in to watch the YouTube version. So that was YouTube Live. The figures dwarf the 800,000 who tuned in for the first hour of Trump's interview. Okay, you go, 1.2 million versus 1.3 million
Swift
versus
is
800.
more popular than Trump.
Okay, then it says this. On YouTube, 9 million people have watched Swift's interview in 13 hours, while Rogan's Trump episode was watched 26 million times in its first 24 hours. So if we double the 9, so Swift in 13 hours, double that roughly for a day, that gives us 18 million compared to 26 million for Trump.
So if I was an ABS expert, I'd be writing a letter to them and saying, you must correct this misleading headline.
Then it also has this classic quote. This is the quote. I could see them beating the Rogan-Trump video, quote, one industry observer told us. Okay? Now, I just had a look then, and this is on YouTube. So guess how many... So this has been up now for a couple of weeks. Guess how many views the Swift interview has on YouTube?
5 million.
No, more than that. Give her a bit more credit.
10?
More than that. 22.
22. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Now, guess what the Trump-Rogan one is? Just on YouTube.
20 odd.
59. 59 million. Okay. So the Trump Rogan interview has annihilated the Swift podcast. And by the way, Rogan is, I think, he mustn't be exclusive to Spotify, but he has some deal with them. So if you had Spotify, it'd be way more than that. So again, the point here is not to have a crack at Taylor Swift, who I don't mind. The point is how the media lies and deceives. And you've always got to read beyond the headline. The headline itself was refuted by the information in the actual article. So Taylor Swift, I know that you're probably a big mainstream fan, so if you could retweet this. I don't have a problem with Taylor. I just have a problem with the media.
Fantastic.
Now, you've got a book that you wanted to share with us.
I do.
You call it Bowens Bible.
I do. So I've finished reading Abundance, How We Build a Better Future by Ezra, Klein and Derek Thompson. So Ezra, Klein and Derek Thompson, two left-leaning journalists. So Ezra Klein writes for the New York Times. He has got a quite thoughtful podcast. And Derek Thompson is a writer at the left-wing Progressive Atlantic. Abundance is interesting. It's had a lot of media over the last couple of months. I'm doing my Fin Review article on it. Jim Chalmers has spoken about it. The head of the Productivity Commission has read it. Apparently, it's sold out in all the bookshops in Canberra. And it's a fascinating book because it's so honest. So in it, these two left-wing journalists talk about their vision for their future. The vision for their utopian future literally doesn't include any meat. And if it does, it's cell-grown. But more importantly than that, it's a remarkably honest book about climate change, about the need for government to get bigger and to do different things. About half of the book is about climate change, and it's fascinating. And I will go to the section that talks about this. It says climate change is the major problem confronting humankind, and that we must spend what is necessary to fix the climate, and quote unquote, they say what matters is not what gets spent. What matters is what gets built. There's no discussion about what the cost of climate change mitigation will be. They're talking about the fact that the Biden administration committed some $450 billion, and they say that's only an estimate, but if we have to spend more, we should. There's no discussion about the impact on consumers, the impact on industry or manufacturing, and you can see why this is Bowen's Bible. You can see why left progressives have loved this book, because it says, damn the cost, just fix the problem if it's even fixable. And there's one other thing that is striking, and as I said, it's remarkably honest. And it talks about the fact that on some projections for the US to be powered by renewable energy, by solar panels and by wind predominantly, some 6% of the US landmass is going to have to be covered in renewable energy facilities, some 6%. So if we apply that to Australia, that is a landmass equivalent to Tasmania, Victoria, and about a quarter of New South Wales. So when you think less than 1% of Australia is urbanised, but we're going to spend 6%, or potentially, if we apply these US metrics to Australia, 6% of Australia's landmass is going to be devoted to promoting renewable energy.
So 6 times more of...
At least 6 times more.
At least 6 times more of the Australian landmass would be taken up by wind turbines, solar panels, so forth. Then there are actually people living in space.
And what's striking about this is that, at least in the US, and full credit to Klein and Thompson, they're acknowledging this. Chris Bowen has never talked about how much of Australia's landmass is going to be used up, how much of our farmland is going to be used up for renewable energy. They also then talk about the 800,000 kilometres of transmission lines that are going to have to be built in the US. So if you think that of doing the calculations, that allows that's the equivalent of the contiguous US being crossed by transmission lines some 70 times. These are ridiculous numbers.
The logic reminds me of COVID. The COVID logic, which is that we have to get cases down to zero no matter what. You remember the whole thing of 2 weeks to shift.
Yeah, flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve. So it's this whole maniacal focus they have on one thing that justifies... I mean, that's why it's so authoritarian. And like we've discussed before, it's a vehicle. Net zero is a vehicle for centralised government control.
And
That's why they love this.
And they talk about the need for the fact that planning regulations have, in the US, as has happened increasingly in Australia, has prevented the building of renewable energy facilities. So what they're saying is that the planning regulations they love and support if it's regulating a new coal mine or a coal-fired power station, well, they should be waived for renewable energy. So this is the double standard that the left embrace, which is we love planning regulations unless they are stopping a 50-metre wind turbine going up.
Which, as you're saying this, it reminds me of a couple of things. One is that it reaffirms what we always knew, that the planning regulations were ideological.
Yeah.
And secondly, it reaffirms to me that the truth, because that's a very honest book, as you say, the truth always wins out. It's just a matter of time.
That's why we're here.
All right, John, we'll leave it there for the week.